Okay, now I just did a video for you on mindset, on a lesson on mindset. I think another good lesson for that is perspective. Your perspective on how you view things is not going to be how others view things. Heck, it might not even be how your spouse or significant other views things. And it's important to be able to recognize that your perspective is not always the right perspective. To be humble enough to say, if someone says to you, this is how I see it, to be like, to try and see it from their perspective. And to be honest, people don't like being told that they're looking at it from a different perspective than you are, or that their perspective is wrong. Oftentimes, the lens that we see things through with our eyes feed us a story. And most of the time, or I should say, it's easier for that story to be a negative story. If you're annoyed with someone, you're probably seeing only negative things that person's doing, only annoying things that person's doing. However, if you're in love with someone, typically you're seeing only everything that person's doing as a good thing, whereas maybe if your friends or family don't like that person, they might see it from another perspective. Anyways, perspective is a challenging thing. It's tough. It's important to be open-minded and understand that sometimes your perspective's not going to change, and neither is another person's. But to respect their perspective, respect their viewpoint, how they see things, and understand that we all come from different walks of life. And it is typically our history or the walks of life that we come from that determine the lenses that we see things through. I'll give you an example. You all know that I lived in Haiti for 2 years, from the time I was 19 to 21. Imagine being this average American teenage kid coming from the richest world in the country, going to one of the probably five poorest countries in the world. I just said richest kids in the country. Coming from one of the richest countries in the world to one of the poorest countries in the world. Learning a language that you know nothing about. Living in conditions that you could never really dream of. Even though you know you're going into it, it doesn't really hit reality. It doesn't really hit you until you get there. And then having a complete culture shock. Things you do here are offensive to people there. Things they do there are offensive to people here. And being the only redheaded white boy there too. And being called albino every 5 seconds. So, albinos is what they would say. Albinos, vim paleo. So, anyways, going to Haiti, my first probably 6 weeks were miserable. Were really tough. 4 months were tough in general. And it wasn't until I was there working with someone who had been there longer than me that I learned how to enjoy things. But here's the crazy thing. The people there, living in those conditions, growing up in those conditions, were always happy. Well, not always happy, but they were reasonably happy. They weren't any more happy or unhappy than people in America. And in fact, I would say you can make them smile and happier even easier than you could in people in America, because you tell a Haitian person a joke or make them smile just in conversation, and they'll be your best friend. You do that here, it's hard to make some stranger smile here in America. They think you're weird or crazy and don't want to talk to you. antisocial. So, anyways, my point in saying that to you is the people in Haiti had nothing. They have nothing. And they found happiness and joy. But we look at it through our lenses of where we come from, and we could just be miserable. It took me 4 to 6 months of being there before I was able to just really appreciate what it was like, what life was like there, living there, be in awe of everyone there and everything they do just to live their daily life. Carry 5-gallon buckets of water in their head. I mean, I never had to carry 5-gallon buckets of water in my head, but I had to carry 5-gallon buckets of water upstairs from wells that we throw buckets in, we pull them up, and there would be roaches in them. Never having electricity. Well, having electricity 50% of the time. And we went 6 weeks straight without electricity at one point. We were sleeping on the rooftops. It was so freaking hot. We had no air conditioning, never had running water. Not once. Our fridge was powered by a propane tank that was on and off for a couple hours a day because we had to use the same propane to turn on the oven. So, and we didn't want to waste it, have it running all day. So, perspective. If you can grow up in Haiti and be happy, or I should say this, you can grow up in Haiti and be happy, and you can grow up in America and go to Haiti and be unhappy because of your perspective. But grow up in America, go to Haiti, and find the joy in being in Haiti. Find the joy, find the perspective and the appreciation for the situation you're in. Try to understand other people's perspectives. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, gotta be honest. But I cannot emphasize enough to you. I mean, and in real life thing, you and your spouse, I mean, maybe there's a rough patch in your marriage or in your relationship with someone where everything you're saying is annoying your spouse. And maybe your perspective is your spouse is picking on you, and maybe your spouse's perspective is that you aren't being very self-aware or aware of her and or him or other people in your family. Try to be able to confront the brutal facts, take a step back, and be open-minded, and try to understand and respect other people's perspectives. And use that to make you a better person. By doing so, typically, the other person will want to appreciate your perspective. But if they don't, it's on them. Don't worry about it. Okay.